Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. In this video, we are going to be covering some of the options that the 49ers will have in order to replace Emmanuel Moseley, who is out for the season. Such a bummer, but there's a lot of different options out there for the 49ers. Let's not waste any time, jump right in. Yes, it was confirmed today by Kyle Shanahan and then, of course, spread throughout the entire media that Emmanuel Moseley did, in fact, suffer a torn ACL in that win against the Carolina Panthers yesterday. Really just a devastating loss. Not only for the defense, we're losing a guy who's playing at a Pro Bowl caliber, potentially all-pro caliber level, but also just for himself as a person, man. Emmanuel Moseley, I really hope he can come back to the 49ers next year. Really deserves a nice big contract. He's done well so far in his career, and hopefully he has a full recovery and is able to go for the 2023 season. Now, with that being said, look, the season just is going to continue rolling on, and the 49ers, of course, are looking to make the playoffs, potentially the Super Bowl as well. So we have to look at some of his replacements. Now, how I'm going to do this is I'm going to break it down into three categories. The first one is going to be guys, internal candidates, guys who are already on the team who could maybe step in and replace Moseley. The next one are going to be external guys, but guys who we are familiar with. And last but not least, the third category will be external players who haven't played for the 49ers before. So we're going to jump right in and kick it off with the internal candidates. The first guy that we're going to talk about is, of course, going to be Jason Verrett. Now, Verrett's injury history is well documented. There's no doubt about that. But with the 49ers in 2020 is where he had one of his best years as a pro and definitely the best string of games in with the 49ers. So he actually had 2 interceptions in 2020, played at an elite level. Quarterbacks had less than an 80 quarterback rating when targeting Jason Verrett. And he's someone who, look, he's been with the team for a long time, very familiar with the scheme, but he himself is coming back from a torn ACL. So my prediction may be this Sunday against Atlanta. I think we'll see a little bit of Verrett just to get him up to game speed somewhat. And then against Kansas City, that's when we're really going to have him out there week 7, big game, hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, another internal candidate that, of course, we're going to have to look at is going to be Ambry Thomas. Now, Thomas was a rookie last year, didn't actually play the year before because of COVID in 2020. So he's someone who didn't have a lot of playing experience. Last year, initially, definitely struggled. That game at Cincinnati, Jamar Chase just made him look pretty darn bad, but he does that to a number of DBs. But anyways, what I liked about Ambry Thomas is as the season went on, he definitely got a lot better. Played a great game week 18, of course, had the ceiling interception to get us into the playoffs, and then played really, really well against the Cowboys and solid again against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. Now, this is a test in Atlanta. They have a really good young rookie receiver in Drake London. Hopefully, he'll be lined up more with Charvarius Ward, but Ambry Thomas is a good opportunity. Him, again, get up to game speed and, really just provide that excellent depth that the 49ers have been able to build. But I like Ambry Thomas a lot, and especially he came on really well late in last season. Now, some other options when we look at some internal candidates, Deommodore Lenoir, Sammy Womack. Now, to me personally, I don't think we'll go with either of these guys on the outside. I mean, in an emergency situation, then I think Lenoir goes to the outside, but I want to say that we want to keep these guys inside, especially with Jimmy Ward missing time, because we know Ward can play inside too. But I think we'll keep Lenoir, Womack in those slot positions right there. We'll have Charvarius Ward, and then it's either going to be Verrett or Thomas if we choose to stick with our internal candidates. And this will be the most likely scenario for week 6 against the Atlanta Falcons. Now moving on to some of the external candidates, but guys that we are very, very familiar with. Of course, and I'm going to say the name, it's going to be Dontae Johnson. Now, a lot of people are pretty mixed on Dontae Johnson, and understandably so, because his performance has been mixed to say the least. But, he's one of those guys where we know he's been with the team a long, long time. Many, many times we've signed him to the roster. Someone who can really step in and I think be okay. He's not going to be a Brian Allen type guy who just loses us an entire game. But I think Dontae Johnson is going to be someone that we potentially look to bring back maybe this week against Atlanta, maybe before the bye week. That way we can have him on the roster. He'll be able to just step right right in and essentially be good to go ideally. Again, mixed, performances, but remember last year in the playoffs against Green Bay at Green Bay, he did play incredibly well. So let's give credit where it's due, but I think Dante Johnson is a potential guy to bring in as well. Speaking of which, Darqueze Dennard, he was with the team a little bit last year, famously that Week 18 game against the Rams. He was only with the team for a couple of days, got the defense down, and then played pretty well there. So he's definitely a candidate to come back. Dennard normally plays a little bit more in the slot, so I think if we do bring him back, then potentially, we move Lenoir back out, or else, it's an interesting one. It'll definitely provide depth and familiarity, so Dennard is an option right there. Next one is going to be someone that we would actually have to trade for, but it's someone that we're very familiar with, and I know 49er fans were very iffy on him when he was here. But that's going to be Ahkello Witherspoon. Now, he's with the Steelers. The Steelers 1-4, their season's going nowhere, so you could easily see them being potential sellers when we get closer to the trade deadline. Look, Witherspoon was with the 49ers for a number of years. The entire time, DeMeco Ryans was here as well, so they're going to be very familiar with one another, and of course, the scheme. Now, when we look at Ahkello Witherspoon, he was actually really, really good in 2021. This year, not so much. And I think some of it, of course, you'd have to put on him. But of course, they're missing, TJ Watt. They're missing a bunch of guys on defense. So their defense, in terms of getting pressure at the cornerback, is not nearly similar to what we do here in San Francisco, where we get consistent pressure against the opposing quarterbacks and force mistakes. So Witherspoon, as a trade candidate, is someone just to throw a name out there. Don't know if it'll happen, but just a name to look out for. Let's now move to some more external candidates, but guys who haven't played for the 49ers. And of course, this would involve us having to make a trade. So really, when I was going to look at possible candidates, of course, I wanted to look at teams whose season really hasn't gone that well so far. So they might be more sellers when it comes to the trade market, looking to accumulate some draft picks as they move forward. So the first guy that comes out is Desmond King of the Houston Texans. Now, King, along with the other two options I'm going to name here, there's certain criteria that I wanted them to meet. Of course, a team who's likely to be a seller at the trade deadline, but also no one who has big money, a big cap hit, so no one like that, and no one who's really tied to a very long-term deal either. So Desmond King is one of the guys who really does fit that description. Now, when you look at him so far, he's actually been playing really, really well. So this season, a 34.5 quarterback rating when being targeted, which is insanely good. Last year, definitely a little bit shaky in 2021, but remember, he's on a very, very bad Houston Texans team. And one of the things that you can't underrate is the fact that when you go from playing for a really bad team that gets no pressure on the quarterback and can't do much of anything, when you come over to the 49ers, then it really allows you to elevate your game. So if we look at it overall, 4 interceptions between last year and so far this season combined. So he's definitely a playmaker. If you actually remember, he did intercept Trey Lance last season in the 49ers against the Texans game last year. But Desmond King, someone who I've always been a fan of, very, very versatile kind of guy, and I think he would be a really good addition to this team, assuming that Houston want to be sellers when it comes to the trade deadline. Now, the next guy is going to be someone who doesn't really get talked about a whole lot, and that's going to be Benjamin St-Juste, and he plays for the Washington Commanders. Couple of really nice things about him. He's very, very young. He's definitely got that traditional, prototypical style that when it comes size and style when it comes to playing in this kind of scheme. He's 6'3", did really, really well this year so far. So one of the things too, again, very, very young, really solid this year, only allowing a 66 quarterback rating and a 33% completion rate this year when being targeted. Now the Commanders, they do have a very strong defensive line. We have the same thing here in San Francisco. So I think he'd be a good fit, not only in terms of size, but he's also a young player. And that might be, so the Commanders might be a little bit hesitant to move on from him, because even if they really should be in more of a rebuilding mode, that they might want to hang on to a young, talented player. But it might be worth looking into possibly acquiring a guy like Benjamin St-Juste to really develop with the 49ers. Now, the last guy that we're going to talk about in this video here is going to be from the Detroit Lions. Now, the Detroit Lions defense is notoriously awful. Let's not make any mistake about that. But one of the guys who I think in a different environment, in a different situation, could absolutely thrive because he's actually proven that he can do that in the NFL, and that's Emmanuel Moseley. So Emmanuel Moseley, 6 interceptions last year. So far this year, he's been playing okay, but ultimately, let's be real. He's played with the Detroit Lions his entire career. Not much talent there, really bad defenses. No pressure on the quarterbacks. Quarterbacks have all day long to throw against him. So with Emmanuel Moseley, if we could bring him in here, definitely one of those guys who's still pretty young in the last year of his rookie contract, if I'm not mistaken, but someone who could really come in, I think, do a really solid job. Now, with any of these acquisitions, especially, and to kind of sum everything up, especially the last 3 guys mentioned, the external guys who have never played for the 49ers, it would definitely take them time to get up to speed. We're probably talking after the bye week. So that would be week 10 really that we'd be looking at. So we still have 3 games before the bye week. So with those guys, it'll take them a little bit longer, but I do think, and we know just how important it is not only to play good football now, but to be playing your best football when it comes to later in the season and then when it comes to playoff time. So guys, let me know what you think about the options that I've been throwing out here in terms of possible replacements for Emmanuel Moseley. I'm still really bummed about the injury. Just feel really bad for Moseley. But again, the season does continue to roll on. You got a whole bunch of other players here who do want to make this a very successful year, a Super Bowl season ideally. That would be awesome. And yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments section. But I'm going to leave it right there, guys. You know I'm going to say 2 things. The butt counts. And I'm going to catch y'all on the flip side.